Good morning on this Sunday, September 10th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. New developments in the Trump Georgia election fraud case. Fulton DA Fonnie Willis moves to protect potential jurors as a state senator renews his call for an emergency session to investigate Willis for pursuing charges against the former president. And dozens of Cobb City opponents now face racketeering charges. Theron, Phil, Malia, and Janelle are here. I'm in for Lori Geary. The debate starts right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
The full report by the Fulton County Special Grand Jury investigating if former President Donald Trump and others interfered in the 2020 election was released on Friday. Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis used the report as the basis for the indictments of Trump and 18 others last month on RICO charges. Parts of the report, the introduction and the conclusion were first released in February, showing that jurors found that there was no widespread fraud in the state's 2020 presidential election. And the grand jurors expressed concerns that some witnesses may have lied under oath but did not reveal if the panel had made any recommendations on potential criminal charges. So with the new release, the full release of the special report, Theron, we'll start with you. One of the surprises to come, oh, you're just looking through that list.
Well, shout out, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The grand jurors recommended some surprises for folks reading through this for the first time. Grand jurors recommending former U.S. Senator David Perdue, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones be among those indicted.
Yeah, so I was about to thank you for getting this to us. I mean, as we tape, we literally are coming in here 30 minutes to sort of kind of dissect this document that I think is probably roughly about 40 pages. And so if I look at some of these names, some people I recognize, some people I don't, but I think you highlighted the big ones, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, former U.S. Senator David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler and others. And I know Phil and Janelle may know some other people who are operatives on here, some people who are around the state of Georgia. So what it tells me, Deidre, is that if you had 39 people who was recommended by the special grand jury that the Fulton County District Attorney put together to sort of make sure that this process was fluid, investigate everyone. The question is, why did she choose the 19 that she chose? And I think that you got to follow the evidence. You got to really look at how they're going to prosecute and when these cases start and these people go to trial. But the other thing that I'm sensitive of, and I'm going to say this to particularly all the Republicans who are listed here, now that their names are out, how is this going to change their lives? I mean, now now you're sort of being mentioned and not indicted, but you were being sort of recommended to be indicted by a special grand jury, even though they were not indicted, and these people are apparently clean. But it does change, I think, their lives personally and professionally going forward.
And Phil, your reaction to what we're seeing?
Well, I think the special grand jury was very reckless. It was helter-skelter. We had all of these names. I'm glad, Theron, you mentioned, I think it's very unfair to some of these people. Some of these people are just exercising their First Amendment right of free speech to question an election, which we all ought to be able to do in America. Let's bear in mind, too, for viewers that really don't understand the grand jury process, this is totally controlled by the prosecutor. The defense has no say in this. Trump and his allies could say nothing. So the prosecutor drew this from a Democrat-dominated Fulton County, and so it's not surprising. You've got 30 people here that were targeted. They got carried away. They got, as you mentioned, 2 U.S. senators, Mike Flynn, the former national security advisor. I'm surprised the Pope and the Holy Ghost weren't on this thing. It just went way, way too long. And I think even Fonnie Willis realized this is crazy, and so that's why it got whittled down to 19.
This was not unanimous altogether for everyone who they recommended be indicted, Melita, but certainly most of those who were on that panel did vote for indictment.
Absolutely. And Senator Lindsey Graham was also on this list. John Eastman, Lynn Wood, Michael Flynn, some other names that were on the recommended for indictment list. The other thing, to Phil's point about Democrat-dominated Fulton County, you still have 2 GOP county commissioners in Fulton County. You have the northern part of the county represented by a Republican congressman, and you have a number of state legislators in the north part of the county who are Republicans. And so there, by the law of averages, there were definitely some Republican-leaning people on this grand jury. And what is interesting is how unanimous these recommendations for indictment were. And what is also interesting is that you have now had in Fulton County both the special grand jury of citizens and the grand jury, which returned the indictments, finding reasons to believe that the 19 who have now been indicted are guilty enough of something that they should be brought to trial. So we're now in what I think of as one of those triple chess games on steroids, because now we have 19 sets of attorneys all filing helter-skelter motions, seeking the case be in federal court versus state court. And so the next few weeks, we're just going to see a flurry of legal motions, a flurry of judgments by both the federal and state court, and it'll be a couple of weeks before we know how this will all begin to play out.
And Janelle, you obviously, I could tell from your reaction to some of the comments Melita was making, feel quite differently about that.
Well, because she was like guilty of something, and that's not what we're here for. So to be clear, what these people did on this list was they questioned some of the outcomes. And there's nothing wrong with questioning the outcome of the election. That we have a right to do that. Particularly David Perdue, he questioned his own race, his own race. So when I look at this, what I'm seeing is this was just anybody who ever had a question about anything, that's who came on this list. What Fani is trying to do is prove that there was a concerted, organized effort to overturn the election. That is what she has to prove. And I personally feel like that's going to be extremely difficult for her, because when you throw all these people in there, you have to show that each and every one of those 19 are interconnected and that they actually work together to try to overturn the election, rather than trying to question. Personally, I have concerns around the Coffee County situation, because I do think that there's something there that she might be able to get someone on. However, outside of that, it's all people working towards showing that they are questioning the outcome of the election. So when I see this, I mean, I feel like this is just, it's just something else to kind of talk about and to make, make news and all of that. But it's nothing I think that's going to actually affect any of these individuals in this new list that just came out.
Yeah, and we're very early in reviewing all of this, but we did talk to some legal analysts here at the station, and there was a question as to your point there, and possibly why the names of those who were not indicted, why those names weren't redacted as part of the release of this. Right. And also the fact that given the statute of limitations, if she so chose to do so, DA Willis could in fact bring these folks up for indictment.
Well, and in particular, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who was recused by the court from indictment by this special grand jury by Fani Willis, there's still the special prosecutor who's supposed to review any evidence against him for continuing to possibly bring a case against him.
Well, that goes to the prosecuting council of Georgia, which will have to decide if there's any evidence whatsoever. I don't think there is any evidence. This is a hit list of Republicans. Fani Willis is a Democrat. She's got right on her desk in her office, you can see it, "Go Democrats." She's a highly partisan person, and she's targeting all these people to hurt them, to hurt their families, hurt their careers, their finances. It's a witch hunt, and it really is disgraceful that these names were brought out.
But the evidence was brought by Republican witnesses in all 4 of the cases now pending against the former president. If you look at the witness list, the people who are testifying against him and those indicted along with him are predominantly Republicans.
They were trying to flip them. There was no police investigation.
It doesn't matter if they're Republicans. Like, that doesn't even matter. What matters is that Fani Willis said herself in an interview that she told people that she would have this done by September 2023. So that right there shows that there's some political motivation. So I think that we all can agree that there is a political aspect
and
to
she's
this.
working in tandem with the feds, who are trying to hurt Trump and his allies.
If I can get a quick word in. To Melita's point, here in this document we have, it said that the grand jury received evidence from over and involving 75 witnesses with information. And then also they had digital and physical media stuff, evidence to basically interview these people. So while, we can debate who the people were, 75 witnesses, a lot of information in the digital form and print form. I think this was a thorough investigation.
Closing out this block, if you're one of those folks named on this list who has not been indicted, What's the conversation you're having right now, and who are you having it with?
You're not talking to
Oh, I'd love to sue.
I know, yeah. The conversation I'm having.
You're gonna
get
see
my
some
name out of
lawsuits.
this conversation. That would be the conversation I would have.
But I'm going to be interested to see some of these people who are listed may actually turn into this. You know, I said this last week. What Donald Trump has done, he's normalized the abnormal, right? He's made it kind of sort of in the Republican Party with some to say, hey, I'm being demeaned. And so some folks, I'll be, sort of anxious to see, do they sort of turn into this and try to attack the DA? But I think the majority of them, I mean, these high-profile people do not want their names on this list.
To your point, there may be some fundraising coming out of this too. That might happen. I don't know.
Well, I don't want to see the First Amendment rights of anyone, Democrat or Republican, trampled on. And a lot of these people, as we pointed out, are just speaking out about what they see rightly or wrongly. And I think it's wrong to persecute those people.
We'll let you close it out, Melita.
Well, if my name were on this list as someone not yet indicted, I'd certainly make sure I have a real good attorney on speed dial.
All right. We'll leave it there. I'm sure we'll be revisiting this in coming weeks. But coming up next, more than 60 people face RICO charges for alleged crimes committed as part of the Cop City protests and renewed calls for action following another inmate death at the Fulton County Jail. We'll be right back.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
New developments in the ongoing battle over Atlanta's planned public safety training center. 61 people have been indicted in Fulton County on racketeering charges following a long-running state investigation into protests against a new police and fire training facility in the Atlanta area that critics call Cop City. Attorney General Chris Carr is prosecuting the case. Some prosecutors allege the defendants are militant anarchists who have supported a violent movement that prosecutors trace to the widespread 2020 racial justice protests. And Melita, I want to start with you this block. It seems that the state is indeed taking a tough line with these Cop City protesters.
A very tough line. And it is interesting that some of those who criticize this RICO indictment have brought out some potential legal errors in the indictment itself and even spelling errors in the charging documents. But I think that the other subtle undercurrent for Chris Carr bringing these indictments is to diminish the more important case that Fonnie Willis has using this same RICO statute. If they can make the RICO statute look petty by bringing this protest. And then the other thing is, back in the days of the Presidential Parkway protests, when people were chaining themselves to trees, you have to look at the aerial view of this training center site. They've clear cut it. There were no trees for them to chain themselves to. So it's going to be very interesting to see this play out and whether these indictments stand the test of time.
Janelle, do you believe this is an overreach?
Oh my God. I'm listening. Okay, Melita, I respect you, but to say that this is like downplay this charge when they had this is a RICO case. It is. These people came in from all over the country. It's clearly an organized effort to try to stop this building from being built. And then we're not worried about the trees. They were throwing fireworks and Molotov cocktails. Like, they didn't need trees. They weren't trying to tie themselves to trees. They were harming people, including construction workers who had nothing to do with what they were upset about. So this right here, we have 61 people. They had false advertisement in order to fundraise. Like I said, they were coming from all across the country. Most of them didn't even live here. So this is clearly a RICO case, and it happened before the Trump case.
Well, but to say that this case, the protest against a police training facility, the plans for which had not even been announced, started on the day George Floyd was killed, it almost puts apples and oranges in the same indictment.
Well, these people are the same people that were doing that. Antifa. They were connected to that.
Well, that's right. It's not only this police training center. This goes back to, yes, 2020 and after the death of George Floyd. I mean, you had the public safety building attacked in downtown Atlanta and firebombed, and you had a trooper was shot at, and you had all this vandalism, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, this is an anti-racketeering law for sure. Mm-hmm. And so I think you ought to put all this in context. The Attorney General is just doing his job here, and if he didn't do this, he'd be criticized by everybody. And I do get a kick out of these liberals and Democrats who all of a sudden love the RICO attacks against the president, former President Trump, and the Republicans, and yet, all of a sudden, this is terrible.
I don't know if we love RICO. You know, where I come from, nobody wants to deal with anybody talking about RICO. So let me just speak for my community. But no, look, to Melita's point, right, is, look, the Attorney General is doing this job, but to indict 61 people, yes, let me just say this. There were some people who did some very horrifying, unacceptable things, right? I mean, it was horrifying. It was criminal. They were bombing people. They were attacking folks. But we also got to remember, guys, we live in this great country called the United States of America, and we've seen it on both sides. No matter who you are, peaceful protest is a way to affect real change.
This wasn't peaceful.
Right? Hold on. So now what you got to decide is, out of these 61 people who were really truly trying to intently, peacefully protest, and who were the people who were really sort of out here trying to destroy property and to vandalize and, you know, destroy and attack people. And so I think that's where the Attorney General's got to come back case by case and sort of prove his points of why these indictments. And the RICO is also, let's say this, it's about whether they were funneling money, how were they dealing with the money, how were they funding this? That's really to me, when I heard the Attorney General talk, is that they were, to his point, allegedly funneling money illegally, you know, sort of moving in at different accounts. And so their lawyers are going to have to defend how this operation was sort of funded.
Yeah, and there was more people than the 61.
It was.
I would assume he narrowed it down, and that's how these 61
I don't think any of these
indicted.
people were peaceful, or you think the Attorney General's made a mistake? And
I didn't say that. I'm very clear what I say about the Attorney General.
Well, it looks like these are serious charges against all 61 there, and you ought to review them.
I did say they were serious, but I think that we got to make sure that were people who were truly intending to peacefully protest, are they in this indictment? I mean, he's going to have to show the evidence. We just got to wait and see.
Melita?
Well, Theron makes great points about how many of these people were a part of the abhorrent, violent bombs and burning cars, the really awful things, and how many of them were peaceful protesters. There's got to be a real proof of the hard evidence to get a conviction.
And to your point, Janelle, real quick, it may have been 150 people who could have been indicted,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, will he release a similar report like Judge McBurney did on the case with Fonnie Willis? And so if we see that.
Read the charges of these people.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's what we got.
These aren't peaceful protesters.
These were the 61.
I don't think anyone's criticizing peaceful protests around here.
And I think some of these, to my knowledge, allegedly, let me make sure I say that, I do believe that some of these people were not necessarily there at like the protesting, but some of them were inside that house that was coordinating efforts
That
and
was the
doing some
headquarters of
fundraising.
Antifa.
Right, and
right,
part
and
of
the Black
that.
Lives Matter. Why do they wear masks, by the way? There's an anti-mask law in this.
We're going to leave it right there. We're going to put a pin in it, as I like to say, because we have several other issues to discuss. Coming up next, we'll hear why Fulton DA Fonnie Willis is asking for special juror protections in the Trump case here in Georgia. And we'll have more on a special appointment making headlines in Georgia at the UN. See you in a bit.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Fulton DA Fonnie Willis is asking the judge in the election fraud case to take steps to protect jurors. Willis is asking Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee to prohibit defendants, the news media, or anyone else from creating or publishing images of jurors or prospective jurors. She is also asking that the judge prohibit the publication of any information that would help identify them, like their physical descriptions, telephone numbers, and addresses. Now, there are grand jurors who indicted Mr. Trump and his co-defendants. They were harassed after their information was posted online, so there are valid concerns.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the country we live in right now. I mean, you know, we got to be very careful what we say on the show. I mean, Phil reminds us that we come on here every week and we give our opinions that's backed up by facts, but also our experiences and kind of what we believe to be true or false. But when you get into the judicial system and we want everybody to have a fair trial, you don't want these jurors to be intimidated. You don't want them sort of not doing things because they fear for their lives. And you also want to not only protect them, but you want to protect their families. And so I think this is a really good move by District Attorney Fonnie Willis to ask the judge to do this, because look, take the partisanship out of it. We want these 19 defendants to basically have a fair trial and have a juror that comes in with an impartial sort of point of view, but also look at the evidence, look at the facts, and make their prediction when the jury is done making their sort of recommendations to the judge.
So everyone is agreement on this.
I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with that. And I think Judge McBurney made a big mistake with the special grand jury, allowing them, especially the foreman, to just run her mouth and say all this stuff and do media interviews around town. I think that was a big mistake, and I think maybe the judge hopefully has learned from that. So I think you made a good point.
Thank you, Phil.
Melita?
I agree.
All right. I think it's my first time here. We're all in agreement. Janelle?
Yeah, no, I agree too. I was going to say the same thing. I think that when it comes to the jury, I mean, these are people who were hand selected, right? I mean, it just showed up in their mailbox. And so they did not know they were going to be a part of this, and they have jobs and families and careers. And so I agree. I think they should be protected. All
right. Well, moving on to our next topic. Problems continue to plague the Fulton County Jail. Another inmate died this week after he was found unconscious at the facility. Chandre Delmore is the 10th Fulton County Jail inmate to die this year, the 6th within the past several weeks. Now, he reportedly died of a heart attack, but attorneys for the family say that the 24-year-old had no pre-existing health conditions and believe ongoing safety and security issues plaguing the jail contributed to his death. Melita, the call is growing for emergency action. The question, what does that look like?
Well, certainly the Fulton County Commission needs to figure out what the problem is in working with the sheriff, because what they've been doing, and they've already taken some emergency actions, whatever they're doing is not working, because we've been having a death a week for the last month. And the other thing is, we need to look at the fact that several of these people who have died are really charged with minor offenses with a very low cash bail set for them. And not being able to make bail shouldn't be a death sentence by your incarceration at the Fulton County Jail. And so that needs to also be looked at. And especially the fact that many of these who have died have mental health issues, and those are not being properly addressed for those who are involuntarily incarcerated.
Defendants are family attorneys for one of the inmates who died said that perhaps, to your point, it should be revisited. The nonviolent offenders, let them out. You've got to handle this backlog of those who are still waiting to be indicted, so they can get their bonds, be released from jail if they can make it out. What do you think, Phil?
You're making a good point about the backlog. This has been a huge problem, especially with all of these indictments by the DA. As I mentioned last week, they're murderers that aren't going to trial. It's been 2 years now. You're making a good point about some of these people with lesser crimes. They would have been out by now, but they're not. And so the big problem is the Fulton County Commission. We discussed this last week, and I can't say this enough. We're talking about $1.7 billion for a new jail. We desperately need it. The Fulton County Commission has been dragging their feet. There could be some patchwork done to fix some of these things we're talking about. I mean, the Fulton County Commission wastes, $200,000 or something like that on some reparations study commission? No, wait a minute. Let's get our priorities straight. Let's go to this jail where people are dying.
Well, one of the things that I don't think you can blame it, and I'm not saying you're only blaming it on the district attorney, but I think kind of most of your criticism goes towards her.
Some of the permissive judges.
But you know where I'm going. So not permissive judges. I think what we need, Deidre, is to really honestly look at the Fulton County. I mean, clearly, look, it's 2023. More people are going to jail, and people are committing more crimes. I mean, it's not just happening in Atlanta. It's happening all over the country. So I want to say that I think that someone's got to really step up and say, do we need more judges? Because you have a district attorney who has an office of prosecutors, men and women, who are basically trying to put people in jail who have done bad things, but as they await trial, one of the things that I think they may need is more judges so we can actually move these people through the process a little faster. So I don't know how that happens. I know you're gonna have to have elections, but I think the state and the county should really talk about increasing the number of judges that we have in Fulton County.
And that's got to be our final word on that. Coming up next, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll start with you, Phil.
Okay, great. I'm going to make a winner. Our First Lady of Georgia, Marty Kemp. She was honored this past week on the big Corey Tower, that iconic tower in downtown Atlanta. Why? Because she has been a champion and crusading against human trafficking. It's a huge problem in Atlanta, Georgia, nationwide, and she's been on the Grace Commission. And also, we lost a great one as a bulldog. Theron, I know you'll join me. We lost Sonny Seiler, the attorney from Savannah, who was the caretaker of the UGA mascot line.
All right, Melita.
Well, I want to give an appreciative shout out to the people at the United States Passport Agency who are fans of the show. It's a great asset to have that agency in downtown Atlanta, and I was very grateful for their quick and efficient service. Senators John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock joined the Veterans Administration Secretary on Friday morning to officially name the VA Atlanta Medical Center in honor of Max Cleland, a well-deserved tribute to his long public service when he lost both legs in Vietnam and an arm. So it's a well-honored, well-thought-out tribute. And then long before there was the Atlanta Film Festival and the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, George LaFont was sharing great movies with Atlanta.
All right, thank you, Theron.
I want to start off by recognizing Kyle Mismari. We all know him, a great American who served this state in a very honorable way as a former state representative. Has just been nominated to the 78th session of the General Assembly for the United Nations. My second winner, to your point, Melita, about running into people, I want to recognize Sharon Collins, Stella Winfrey, and Connie Hordich in the Athens-Clarke County Ward of Business Center. I went in there, I took pictures, they were great to me. And then lastly, DeKalb County residents will have an opportunity to have a billion-dollar e-host that will be on the ballot for 6 years of home relief in DeKalb County.
All right, Janelle.
All right, my winner is Xiomara Castro, a friend of mine. She launched her organization, Freedom in Education. So proud of her. You can go to freedomined.org if you want to find out more. And shout out to Marty as well. And my loser is Hunter Biden's attorney for downplaying his gun charge.
All right, have a good one.